My final guest is General Sir Mike Jackson, former chief of the General Staff who commanded multinational forces in the Kosovo conflict, where he famously refused to obey an order from the American General Wesley Clark to block the runways of Pristina Airport and isolate the Russian contingent, telling General Clark, quotes, "I am not going to start the Third World War for you." I'm delighted that he can join me now live. General Sir Mike, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Are we looking, or were we at any juncture, at the possibility of a Third World War over Ukraine?
I can't rule it out. I find that very hard to say, but in all honesty, it cannot be ruled out. The situation is very delicate in terms of East-West and its future.
If he were to use nuclear weapons in response to the imposition of a no-fly zone, that would be it?
If we were to use nuclear weapons?
No, if Putin were to respond to a no-fly zone, he's already deployed the hypersonic weapon, he's got chemical weapons. I'm saying the moment that he makes that move, then we are in that scenario that you've just said. I dread to admit it, but it could be that.
It's uncharted territory. We haven't, thank God, seen nuclear weapons used since 1945. We have survived that long without further use. I honestly don't have the confidence to say we can survive the next, whatever it is, 2/3 of a century without such use.
That's quite staggering, and I'm going to let that sink in at home, but then ask you next. You have fought and won wars. Why, in military terms, conventional military terms, has the great Russian army not won in Ukraine?
I think their intelligence was faulty in that the expectation was a blitzkrieg. Kiev would fall within 48, 72 hours. They would be welcomed with flowers and cheering, a puppet government put in, and Ukraine then becomes part of a larger Russia. That has not happened. And one wonders whether the intelligence was there to say that what has happened is going to happen, and Putin either wouldn't accept it, or he was never told, or that the intelligence was faulty. I don't know the answer.
Is the other possibility, Mike, that the morale of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army and their national purpose in defending everything that they stand for outguns and outflanks the great Russian army?
I think it was Napoleon who said that in war, the moral as to the physical is 3 as to 1. We are seeing writ large by the extraordinary, courageous defense of their country by the Ukrainian armed forces.
There is a growing suggestion, I want to tie that point together with something that you said earlier, a growing suggestion within the intelligence community that Putin is now losing support at home among the real power brokers, including his generals, many of whom are dying at the front line, and amongst his intelligence community. They don't think he's going to win this either.
I hope that is right, because it seems to me the only way that we can bring this dreadful war to an end is for Putin to accept that his original aims are unachievable.
Nick Gowing, who I know you're familiar with and have chatted to, and I think he's interviewed you a few times as well, was on the programme earlier on, and you will know that he has made this assertion, but let me just repeat it for folk at home as well. If Putin were to succeed in Ukraine, by gun or by negotiation, he will then aim for more. The Baltics, the old Soviet Empire, right up, as Zelensky himself said, to the Berlin Wall. Is Gowing right about that?
He might be. None of us can know what is in the mind of Vladimir Putin in terms of further action. But as many commentators have reflected, when you look back on things that Putin has said, his objective appears to be rebuild the old Soviet Union in territorial terms to make a greater Russia. And of course, within that old Soviet empire are the Baltic states, Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, etc.
Boris Johnson says that this is a turning point for the world, a turning point on values, on what we stand for, freedoms, and the rest of it. Tough question, Mike, but I'm going to put it to you. In your view, and given all of your experience and leaders that you have served in uniform, is Boris Johnson, is Joe Biden, NATO, the rest of it, up to that challenge?
It had very well better be.
I accept that, but do you think they are?
My jury is out. It's an impossible question to answer. I think the reaction in the West over the last month has probably surprised quite a lot of people. The matters which a month ago drove politics in this country and elsewhere now seem to be pretty trivial compared to the enormity of what is happening on the east of this continent of Europe. Whether we have the determination and the will to stand up to this dreadful aggression, so far, I'm encouraged. We have to stay.
You've served.
One of the problems is that the West is impatient. It worries about Monday morning rather than a strategic view as to where we should be in 20, 30 years' time. But it's a wake-up call. This Russian aggression is a real wake-up call.
Last but one question, Mike. Yesterday on the programme, I was interviewing Ben Wallace, again, a man I know that you know, not only as Secretary of State for Defence, but perhaps more importantly as a former serving officer in the Scots Guards. And I said to Ben something that strikes me as the son of an Air Force officer, but a military man as well, is that everything that's going on in Ukraine, the values that are at stake, are what people like Ben Wallace fought to defend when he was in uniform and now fights to defend as an elected democratic politician. Is that said, I see you nodding your head, that will be grasped clearly and firmly by our current military leaders?
I believe so. It's not my place to give marks out of 10 for this or that minister. But I do believe the Defence Secretary has done a pretty good job so far. Could be a long way yet.
Sure. Final question. That celebrated moment back in Kosovo where you developed a working relationship with a Russian general, giving a bottle of whiskey and then jointly consuming it, and rightly so. If the phone rang now, either Boris Johnson or Ben Wallace, and said, Jackson, What the hell do we do to defeat Putin or to make the peace? What would your advice be to the Defence Secretary or the Prime Minister?
That's a pretty political question, but we have to continue on the road we have now set out, which is to assist Ukraine short of military presence in the air or the ground, and I'm content with that argument, is you raise the stakes somewhat. But to continue that support, to continue to ostracize Putin, whilst remembering that our differences are not with the Russian people, who are, in the longer term perhaps, as vulnerable to Putin's aggression as we are. And we must play it long. We're in this, I suspect, for quite a time. And some of the old points of contention in the West, socially, politically, should now be overshadowed completely by the strategic importance of getting this right.